Hey, this is Misery Loves Company, a weekly social reading series hosted by miserytourism.com. Every Friday, we welcome outsider and transgressive writers to share their work with us. And it's Friday again, so let's get rolling here. First up tonight is Cletus. How are you doing, Cletus?
Hey, pretty good. Yeah, I'm okay. I heard some of what y'all were talking about earlier, and I had some really strong feelings about it, but then I didn't have strong feelings about it, because I kept reading all the tweets and um, I feel like it was I don't know. I don't even know what to think. The reason I'm saying this is because it ties into the piece that I'm gonna read. It's a nonfiction piece. It's due out soon, but it kind of made me think of whether or not, like, I don't know, the whole controversy. Um, but it's about my, uh, kind of, not kind of, abusive grandfather, but it's about that. This is called Eulogy, and it's creative nonfiction. He was only Jack, never Daddy. He was Jack, not Grandpa. He was Jack like knife, Jack like shit, like what you'd use to lift the car before changing a tire. He was also a drunk who called his son different animals depending on his mood. Bitch, rat, you fucking vulture. But as a child, Jack wasn't Jack. He was called John, and John had a German shepherd named Jack. Jack loved John. One day, Jack saw John getting switch whipped. Jack bit the hand that dealt the blows, the hand belonging to John's drunk mother. Minutes later, the dog received a bullet in the head. John found Jack under a trailer beside a pile of brains. Then, John named himself Jack. Jack grew up. He became a politician. He was good at lying. He had a son. His son was good at theater, a different kind of lying. Jack said, "Hell no. Acting is for F slurs. You're going to be a doctor." Jack was also an experienced hunter. Jack took his son quail hunting every autumn. Looking down the barrel, Jack's son had suicidal thoughts. He got help, became a doctor. Jack once told me he burned a cross on his front lawn, not because he was racist, but because he hated Democrats. Jack took me fishing every summer. Jack never hit his grandkids, but he liked playing mind games. He said the burning cross was a legacy we'd carry on or else. Jack's son and I enjoyed stories about the hunts of Jack's youth, how he killed a boar with a bowie knife, how the boar had killed 4 dogs the next neighborhood over, how Jack became a hero that day. The boar rushed him, Jack stabbed its kidney. Jack was fun to watch sports with. He predicted plays before they happened. He knew every detail about every player because TV was his best friend. When Jack's lungs began to fail, we put him in hospice. It was bittersweet, but mostly sweet. Jack had dementia and couldn't walk. I stopped by to see him in October. He watched football, and Jack mumbled. He just mumbled the whole time. When I got up to leave, he said, "Wait, I need to tell you something. You're everything a young man should be. I've seen you with that cat of yours. That's how you know a man's soul, by how he treats his animals. I've learned a lot being here. I have more sympathy now." I couldn't decide whether to say fuck off, thank you, or, well, do you know I'm a faggot, Grandpa? I never told you because I was afraid you'd kill me, but you can't hurt anyone now. I love you. I'm in love with the drag queen. I'll rub their feet after their set tonight. We'll watch Succession and drink what red wine. You will be there too, a ghost without a sheet. Behind my eyes, I never called you Grandpa. Your son never called you Daddy. But you're my grandpa and you're my dad's daddy, god damn it. Daddy, grandpa, papa, grandpa, 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 motherfucking grandpa. If someone like you tells a man he's everything a man should be, does that mean he should change his life? I didn't say any of that. I didn't open my mouth. I just hugged Jack and left. So that's it. Thanks, y'all.
Holy fucking shit, man. First of all, that was absolutely heartbreaking. I Jesus. Um and I think really, really fucking effective. And I know that I can see how like the present discourse over over Butler's Molly memoir might have influenced this piece, but setting the fucking discourse aside, this is just really brilliantly effective at capturing the ambiguity you feel over the death of a loved one who maybe isn't a loved one. Like this is great because there are there are other versions of this story that either uniquely fixate that kind of like that maybe say, oh yeah, he was kind of a bad guy, but here's the trauma, right? Like this is why he was an asshole. Or like conversely, there are versions of the story where he is so entirely unsympathetic that it really is like, like flagellating a corpse. And this is neither of those things. This is, you get an astute and uncompromising look at the life of a human being who maybe was not the best fucking human being, right? You understand in just this very brief piece, because of the details you selected, you understand his psychology acutely. Like you understand the degree to which he was a product of his upbringing and his times, and the degree to which, though, that like there was something calcified there, like a choice that he made not to be a complete human being before the end. And just like the way you present that like attempt to make amends at the end, and the question of like the ambiguity of how he means it and also how you should feel about it, man, it's just really, really powerful, effective writing. So yeah, it's good
Thank
fucking
you.
work, man.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. Yeah, I guess I just didn't know what to do in those last moments. And it is kind of a thing of like, at this point, he wasn't a writer. Like he can't really say what I guess, but at the same time, I feel like I don't know. I feel like it's important to write, or at least the piece is important to me, to a certain extent, just because
Mhm.
some people you can't help but loving, but even though they're monsters, like everybody has different sides to them, sort of thing. And but yeah, and anyway, I'm rambling. Thanks for listening, you guys.
No, I get it, man. And I think you did a really good job of presenting your pain and your grief over both his loss and his life, right? While also presenting him in a really complex and multifaceted way, which is something that's really hard to do when you're writing about grief, right? Because the like fog of your own personal emotions is so strong that seeing the other person through them like requires a real amount of insight and restraint. And I think you really pulled that off here. So yeah,
Thank
man.
you.
Thank you, man. And Rudy is up next.
Hey there. Uh, yeah, so I'm gonna tweet my thing out here and then I'm gonna read a piece that I guess is um I think it's Warhammer Twitter fan fiction, I guess. Warhammer Discourse Palestine War fan fiction or something, I don't know. Before I read this, I must say that I hate to do a dedication here, but B-Boy actually inspired a lot of this by rekindling my interest in Warhammer through miniature painting and stuff, because I've always been interested in the setting, but I've never really looked at any of the setting stuff, and he kind of sent me down a rabbit hole the other night that inspired a lot of this. So anyway, this is called Warhammer 2.024K Fatima, Immortal Dreadnought. Warhammer 40K is played on a decorated battle mat. Players measure distances using specially crafted, highly expensive rulers called chodes. This is a fact, you can look it up. You buy and paint action figures from Games Workshop to play this game, or if you aren't a fucking retard, you buy a 3D printer and print secondhand ones, because that's still net cheaper than paying $1,000 for a huge jack dude that you still have to paint and assemble yourself. Warhammer 2.024K is played on Twitter. Players measure distances based on how far removed they are from the Israeli-Palestinian conflict of 2024. In Warhammer 40K, the Imperium faction fights Chaos factions and other bads. They have been at war for an eternity. Endless war. Insane war. War translating across time and space. A snail crawling across a straight razor. Devil horns in the air. In Warhammer 2.024K, the Palestinian and Israeli factions have been at war for an eternity. Endless war. Insane war. War translated across 13 languages by Google Translate. Brought to your home by a little bird. The IDF, oops, I lost my place here, sorry. The IDF are a faction like the Death Corps of Krieg, gas masks, black clothes, you know, Tre Militarum. The Palestinians are the good guy faction that doesn't kill civilians, the Salamanders. They are also similar to salamanders in that they are under rocks a lot. In Warhammer 40K, select fallen Space Marines earn the honor of being interred in a sarcophagus fitted with technology that is not fully comprehended. In Warhammer 2.024K, dead 10-year-olds named, say, Fatima, earn the honor of being interred in a low-quality WebP file and distributed on another barely fathomable technology called social media. In Warhammer 40K, they place a sarcophagus into the Dreadnought, a massive battle mech built on the premise that if you're unlucky enough to get splattered, your remains can still be used as a weapon to blow orc faces off. In Warhammer 2.024K, they place the WebP file onto a social media platform, a massive Cthulhian sinkhole built on the premise that people shouting into keyboards can topple walls and mountains, like those dudes at Jericho who blew their horns. What most in the Warhammer 2.024K universe fail to understand is that those WebP files are actually much stronger than the Warhammer 40K dreadnoughts, because files can be cloned at will and iterated thousands, millions, billions of times. Hey, you fucking retard who's about to go buy a dreadnought from Games Workshop for like $70. Go buy a 3D model of a Mechanaut from a weird online storefront called Tug McGroin's Ethical Wares instead. It looks just as cool, and you can print it as many times as you want. You can have as many Mechanauts as you have resin to print them. This is an advertisement for Tug McGroin's Ethical Wares, and also an explanation of why Fatima.webp is so powerful. Poor Fatima. Head flowering open from germinations of 556 Fatima. Disney princess and some old photos Fatima. Want to see more warm pictures of Fatima? Well, you can't, Fatima. Cold dead Fatima. Clonable Fatima. Appears on some boomer's Facebook feed and isn't even his kid, Fatima. 400 retweets, Fatima. 10K likes, Fatima. This has to be Hamas propaganda, Fatima. This has to have been generated by a GAN, Fatima. Unstoppable, Fatima. Wielded blind by the tech boys, Fatima. Wielded cunning by the media boys, Fatima. Wielded hard and dirty by the Commissar Cummer boys, Fatima. Grace dripping from mortal wounds, Christ comparable, Fatima. Weaponized spilled blood, xenomorph, Fatima. Listless 20-year-olds with a new cause tossing and turning, Fatima. Fatima the omni-personal, waging mechanized mecha jihad with head-targeted cannons that see when you cry. Fatima the chronoballistic, impact wounds all over your fucking timeline. Fatima the immortal dreadnought, jaw slack because she doesn't give a fuck, and because she's dead. In the Warhammer 40k universe, the Emperor of Mankind is the defender of humanity in the face of writhing, gyrating, shimmy-shaking chaos. He commands an army that includes, among its most feared denizens, the Dreadnoughts. In the Warhammer 2.024k universe, there are many emperors and empresses because there are many Terras, a result of pervasive social media bubble sorcery. Each commands a legion of takes, opinionated axioms, and discourses, all bolstered by dreadnoughts like Fatima. While many of the hallowed dead have been sarcophagized for endless battle, so too have the emperors and empresses commanding their power been entombed in the chassis of their bubble-making machines. From these wired interfaces, they wage campaigns, probe the topography of Earth's political landscapes, thwart evil, and commune indirectly with the inscrutable rulers of their universe, those who move bubbles with locomotive winds, those who create the fronts that conjure said winds, those who cite and leverage volatile figures like public opinion inside the halls where federal budget arcana is spoken of in hushed whispers, in subcommittees, in just cause balance beams adjusted just so. In the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war. And that's it.
Man, first of all, before I say anything about the content, I have to say I love what you've done with the formatting here. The picture at the top, is that like AI assisted, or is that just a GIMP collage?
It's both. It's a AI assisted GIMP collage. So
Okay.
yeah.
I really dig that.
It's basically a dreadnought with the picture of the little girl on it, like tattooed.
Yeah. No, I really, that's something that I really continuously dig about your work, is that there's always a lot of thought put into presentation, and especially presentation for the web. I love the way the text is formatted in this, though. I not just the all cap stuff, but the presentation of the word dreadnought, the way this really feels like you're reading the back of a Warhammer miniature box, right? Like you've turned around the back of one of those big boxes that has, and this is basically like the propaganda, effectively, like the marketing push printed on the back. And so I love that. I love the inclusion of in the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war tagline. But what I really dig, though, about this piece is how, in your usual semi-comic way, you're able to find this like wonderfully absurd parallel between like the least, how do I say this? Like the least reverent and least serious, like constructed world, like fake world to exist ever. You're able to find a parallel between that and like the constant grinding reality of social media, and how that like takes human trauma and like grinds it up into a paste and uses it as a weapon. And like I love the stuff with the dreadnought and like the weaponized dead and all of that shit, and how neatly it dovetails with the way that human lives are reduced to propaganda on social media and then reanalyzed and turned into propaganda for the other side, and so that's great. And I love the fact that you do it all in a way that never that doesn't itself become propaganda, right? Like this is not like making some ideological statement. It's a kind of bleak description of the actual reality that we exist in when we go on social media, and the parallel between that and the like silly grimdark of Warhammer is so appropriate, because like if you had compared Twitter to like some serious literary dystopia, like 1984 or Brave New York World or something, the resonance of that would be completely different. People would be like, "Oh, he's making a point," and that would make social media so much more serious than it actually is. But instead, by taking the like goofiest, um, most absurd, like and least serious setting you could, and comparing that to social media, the impact of the piece is so different, and I think so much more interesting. So yeah, it's good shit, man.
Hey, thanks. One thing I should say is this avatar I have, this is actually a character from Warhammer. His name is Lion L. Johnson. And when I first heard B-Boy show me this, and when I first heard this, I was like, that's gotta be like a black man, right? But no, this is Lion L. Johnson.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, Warhammer.
Does he actually have like lion arms? What's going on with his hands there?
I think that's part of his cloak. I'm not sure. I don't know,
Is that a
honestly.
oh, okay. What?
Yeah, I think it's his cape or whatever. Like, that's how
Oh,
he
it's
goes
like he's
into.
got like lion paws on his cape.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah,
Oh, okay. Oh yeah, because
it's
I
a
can see
while.
his hand. His hand is holding the sword. Okay. It's
Yeah,
it's a
one thing
rather low res.
it is. One thing about Warhammer that you hit on, I think, is that, and B-Boy can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's basically played super straight. It's a goofy setting, but it's played super serious because like that's the whole humor in it is like, and that's why a lot of people take it the wrong way. They're like, oh, this is fascist because they play it so like straight. And that is one of the parts, the source of the humor. And that it's like social media, right? Where everybody is putting on a face for the shit. But that's one thing that inspired me anyway. So
That's a
sorry.
good
Anyway, I'm rambling.
point. No, no, that makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. That's a good point. Yeah, because there's just the like social media facade of importance when some dude is like sitting there in his underwear just like retweeting shit for engagement or whatever. But the need to pretend
Exactly.
in order to like that it's all serious in order to maintain. Yeah, anyway, yeah, I get it, man. Thank you, man. That was good stuff.
Let me read.
And Keith is up next.
Can you hear me okay?
Beautifully.
Okay.
Yep.
Well, thanks for letting me read. So the title of this piece is Circling the Square, the Death and Life of a Poet. He may be undiagnosed, though at this point in his life, does it really matter? Has the reader already been turned off? Have they lost interest? Do they care? If he's writing for himself, why does he care about the reader? Does he have delusions of grandeur that his arrangement of words is going to affect someone's life? Or is he delusional that words are going to save his own mortal life? And why does he think anyone is ever going to even read this? A square peg won't fit into a round hole. How does one come to believe that to be a truism? Words have meaning. Everyone says it, so it must be true. Who is everyone? Is the statement to be taken literally, or is it a metaphor? Please explain your words. and your thoughts. Think before you speak. Kimchi videos, Korean food, leads to London, leads to Taco Bell, leads to shrimp, and picking a ripe Meyer lemon hanging from a small branch of a discounted, to be discarded Home Depot plant that was saved 12 years ago. Nurtured and cared for in a teal painted 13.5-inch diameter fiberglass planter, blooming yearly with wonderfully scented blossoms yielding to fruit. And now, in 2023, he will harvest a lemon and use it to marinate shrimp for making a recipe of ceviche, something that he has yearned to do for years. Had it not been rescued, the Meyer lemon plant would have continued to wilt and die in the August heat of the Florida summer in a paved parking lot of Home Depot, a victim of obviously targeted neglect. When one is dying on the vine, just let them die, some say. There's more than one metaphor in this story. Does anyone care anymore? Can a rhetorical question make one uncomfortable? It's good to always be a bit uncomfortable. He may be undiagnosed, though at this point in his life, does it really matter? The deep dive began with hearing a story, reading a tweet, listening to a podcast, doing a Google search, and looking above and seeing the faint disk of the sun fading. A feet-first jump from the dock's railing into the black waters of the creek, charted at over 20 feet deep at the point of entry. Arms extended overhead, hands held together, knees and feet touching to a point, head cocked back and looking upwards, eyes opening after impact. Remember the high dive practices at the city pool years ago? The orangish glow of our sun fading as we fall downward into oblivion, the pressure building between our ears, in our heads, in our minds, in our lives, toes touching the tips of a branch of a fallen tree resting on the bottom, and then reversing our course like a rocket headed towards space, the hands cupped, arms extended, pulling downwards, feet kicking in fast motion, repeating and repeating, following our last bubbles of air to the surface, bursting through, gasping for another breath of life, resurrected, for worse or for better. He may be undiagnosed, though at this point in his life, does it really matter? He realizes that he is not in Niagara Falls, nor on the Washington Avenue Bridge, nor the Brooklyn Bridge. Contemplating. He is on a bridge, but not a bridge. He realizes that he is escaping, but not from Dannemora, nor from New York. He is escaping with his fingers, leaving this mortal world with thoughts, a dashed M, dreams, realities, memories, another dashed M, a conclusion of a thought, a period, the end of a time. He writes a poem in an unconventional style with an unconventional meaning. He knows what he has done, and he doesn't care. He sees himself reading in front of the class, tears forming in his eyes, the expressions on his friends' faces, and he knows that they know, and they feel, and they will remember. And isn't that what writing is really all about? He knows what his English teacher would have said, and he knows her history and life to a point many years ago. And well, he doesn't want to talk about the dead. He opens Google and does a search on her name. She should be, but is she dead? Inquiring minds must know. He follows the leads and remembers his English teacher's son, his meanness, his hatefulness, his classmate, just like his mother. He is not his friend, only his classmate. He died. He was driving. His wife was beside him. their large dog in the back seat, unrestrained, uncaged. It was late at night when the dog leaped unexpectedly. Yes, what happened was what one would expect to happen. And the funeral, just 8 years after their high school graduation, followed. He sees more Google results, and his English teacher's name is not the same. He verifies her middle name initial and heads into the maze only to reach a dead end of divorce and remarriage soon after her son's death. He backtracks and takes a turn and ends up in the 1960s with his English teacher's college professor husband. He doesn't want to know anything more about his despised teacher or her former college professor husband. He thought that he knew all he needed to know and wanted to know. But one never knows where Google will take one. And now he is reading the article from the college newspaper, dated 2019. The article reflects an African-American woman's history at the college in the turbulent late 1960s, a changing time for a young country in an old South town. It is his English teacher's college professor husband's comments and remarks that the woman is reflecting on. They are hateful, mean-spirited, racist, stereotyped conversations that the professor had with her, intending to destroy her dreams to earn a degree. Ultimately, she earned her degree as one of the college's first African-American students and went on to earn 2 master's degrees and have a very successful career in education as a teacher and administrator. He realizes that some things run in the family: father, mother, son. He's had enough of this game. How did he do? He asked the dead, and the dead to him. Was the punctuation correct? The grammar? The subject verb? The adjectives and adverbs in the right position correctly used? Is it too passive or is it too aggressive? Did the messages come across or did you miss them completely? Why was the class crying and sad? Did you not look beyond your nose? Did you not listen? Others listened. Words have meaning. He may be undiagnosed, though at this point in his life, does it really matter? He carries and has carried his baggage through the bus stations, the train stations, the airports. He has been on a lifelong journey with everyone and everything. It has been a life of love and a love of life. He has never been truly alone. No one is ever truly alone. The ghosts of the past are always by our sides. The ghosts of the future are patiently waiting, waiting for each of us, waiting for our return. He may be undiagnosed, or we may all be undiagnosed, but does it really ever matter? Sooner or later, a square peg will fit into a round hole. And it's then that you will have circled the square. Ashes to ashes, dust to dust. The death and the life of a poet and their poems lives on. Thanks for listening, y'all.
That was awesome, Keith. I love the structure of this piece. It's almost like telescopic in a way, which is to say that, like, I love the way it will zoom out to like broad generalities and then zoom in real deep on a single moment in history, like with the Meyer lemon tree, right? And what I really dig about that is this is very much a kind of like stream of consciousness style piece. And often when people do stream of consciousness, it's often one of the like consistent issues the stream of consciousness pieces have is they become kind of monotonous after a while, because in attempting to mimic the rhythms of thought, the author ends up flattening thought, right? And almost like, and often creating things that are so abstract. but what you do is really in this piece is really fascinating because, as I said, you'll like zoom out an abstraction and then you'll zoom in really, really deep and intimately deep to this one specific moment, right? And then you'll zoom out and you'll get like the more connective tissue in there, and then zoom in again. And that is I think in some ways more similar to how the human mind actually works, which is to say that you'll be kind of floating, right? You'll be kind of like floating in generalized thoughts and a vague sense of what's going on. And then you'll suddenly like have this brief, vivid flash of something that happened 20 years ago, and it'll be like reliving it. And it'll be like telescopic in that same way. It will be like a journey directly into something really intimate and something really detailed about this otherwise lost moment. And then you'll like pull back again. And it's just pieces just it's wonderful in that way. I particularly liked and I'm not sure why, but I really love the section about the lemon and just the journey there and how it reconnects, and also like the very specific detail, like remembering exactly where that lemon came from, where the lemon tree came from, and how it was transplanted, and like how it still has life now in the dish that you're preparing, and the significance of that. It's just really, really, I think, like an oddly riveting piece of writing about something very mundane. Yeah, good stuff.
Thank you. Thanks, William. I appreciate the remarks. Thank you for listening.
Yeah, Keith, I just wanted to say I really like the part where you do the kind of mini vignette with like Google, like the Google searches and that shit, because that really goes like William mentioned the stream of consciousness thing. That's like such a good way of doing it uninterrupted. Like just showing the history, like showing history through a history of Google searches. Like it's really like things like happening in the 60s and wherever that's like older than the internet, but it's represented in like this like paper trail of Google searches, or whatever, not a paper trail, but that kind of thing. I thought that was really cool.
I wrote it as I was it's auto fiction. It's mostly autobiographical, not much fiction in it. But as I was reading and going through the motions of all the searches and following everything and going down one trail and another and going down rabbit holes, I was writing the story as it was taking place.
Yeah, no, oh no, go ahead, man.
Oh no, I was just going to say that's funny, like because it seems like I've talked before about how you have like these oddly serendipitous moments at Misery Loves Company where there's like a continuity with something else going on. And I don't know if the tweet is still up, but earlier today I saw on Twitter that Bizarre and Kat were talking about Google search results, and Kat posted a piece that she wrote that was just like basically a log of her Google search results from a particular period in time. So it's really it's got, I don't know, it's fascinating to see like the continuity there, to see different authors handle the same subject in very different ways, but equally effective ways. Anyway, Keith, that was very good. Thanks, man. And thank you for bringing up the Google search thing, because I wanted to, and it slipped my mind while I went off on a different tangent.
Thanks, Sean.
Yeah. Yeah, I think Jan wants me to read.
I was just gonna
for
say,
Jan.
Rudy, I believe you're up reading one of Jan's pieces. I think there's like some secret like sadomasochistic thing going on here, if I'm gonna be completely honest. I think that Jan may or may not get off on some level to making for when making people read his work. But who am I to stand between a man and his gratification?
Jan has actually warged into my body in a Game of Thrones sense to do this piece, so I'm gonna try to read this if I can while being warged into. This piece is called Intrusive Thoughts by Jan. dogs fucking the Pope, anal sex with man-eating lions, the N-word 26 times in a row. My uncle is black. Having sex with old people, cyberpunk unsway memories of getting sexually assaulted. I am the Adolf Hitler of having OCD because I think about the Holocaust several times a week, and it is unrelenting, a mental blitzkrieg. My nervous system is failing me. My hands shake for no reason. I have seizures and night terrors. My teeth are rotting out of my skull. I live like I'm going to be dead in 5 years. Wondering what would happen if I told one of my coworkers that I hate her. I don't. But what if I did? It would be bad. It would be so bad. Fist fucked by Jesus Christ. Minstrel show mental images. The genuine thoughts of a Jim Crow era white lady getting beamed into my skull. I pray 72,000 times a day. Doesn't help. I am getting worse, which is good for my development as an artist, if you buy into that sort of mentality, that mentally Catholic idea, I'm sorry, that suffering makes good art. Looking at mine is solid proof that this is not true, which I really don't bad for trying to hold a conversation, because half the time I'm having unpleasant thoughts of Jesus Christ being gangbanged by Roman centurions, blasphemy against the Holy Spirit, about 12 times a day. I believe that's the whole piece. Jan, that was fucking awesome, dude.
Holy shit. So I really, first of all, getting back to the serendipity thing, we're back at intrusive thoughts now. We're back at stream of consciousness. So that's cool. Now, Jed, I understand this is something you wrote very quickly, but I actually really fucking love this piece. And what I love is, so there are two like different lesser versions of this piece, right? One that's just like an unrelenting unfurling of like really ghastly imagery, and another which is purely about like personal neuroses. But it's like the very specific way that you've intermingled this very bleak, very ghastly, very ugly imagery that's also like incredibly funny, maybe just to me, but that that I found incredibly funny, with like the like intrusions into the intrusions of like your actual neurotic feelings about these thoughts, right? Like the religious guilt and the social anxiety and the interpersonal tension and stuff that's coming out in the form of these really graphic images, and like the balance between those two things. And it's got a really good rhythm to it too, for something that was written very quickly, the way that it flows from like the really ghastly shit to the more intimate shit, and back and forth. And the way it's like, for a piece that's like ultimately a self-portrait by way of intrusive thoughts, I don't know, it's perfect. It's perfect because it really does function as a self-portrait and not just as a purely stream of consciousness like brain vomit piece, right? I dig it. I don't know, it's good. um yeah.
Jan, uh, so first of all, I just want to say something. I was gonna say the N word 26 times. I contemplated doing that because you have the phrase, it's or the line that's the N word 26 times in a row. So I was gonna say that, uh, but I didn't. So I think I failed a little bit there. But this is a fucking phenomenal poem because, yeah, the imagery like tracks to mental imagery, at least for me. the imagery of like intrusive thoughts, like, not just thoughts that are like, well, and I would have kept counting. I'm sure you would have. but not just thoughts that are like coming from nowhere, but they're like thoughts that like feel actively hostile, like breaking into your house type of thoughts, like home invasion, like Mine Castle home invasion type of thoughts. Like a lot of this shit is like shit that I'll like think about, and then I'll start saying it, which is kind of a problem. But to get back to um, there's a line. Where is it? The end line there. It's half the time I'm having unpleasant thoughts of Jesus Christ being gangbanged by Roman centurions, blasphemy against the Holy Spirit about 12 times a day. But you also say that's juxtaposed with the part where you say I pray 72 times a day. Doesn't help. I like that. It's a good poem, man. Like, fuck, I don't know.
Yeah, Rudy, I'm glad you brought up that juxtaposition because I didn't catch that, but that's really fucking good. Anyway, thank you, Rudy, for allowing Jan to warg into you, or vice versa, however it works. And I guess you would be like the Hodor figure then, and Jan would be the anyway.
Hodor.
But thank you for giving the service of your body, Rudy, and Jan, thank you for giving the service of your mind to come together to. Anyway, anyway, fucking Jeff is up next. Tyler, it was not a Freudian slip. I was trying to say Jan and it came out Janet. Sure. Again, canceled again. Actually, that would be like my first cancellation of 2023, I think, and the year is almost over. Damn. I didn't live right this year. Anyway, Jeff, the floor is yours.
Great. I probably should give a little disclaimer here to Mr. C. Cletus, because he's cornered the market on penis core, and there's a little bit of penis in here. And I promise you, Cletus, I wrote this like 4 months ago. So, I'm not trying to bite on your shit, okay? But this one I titled And Then Black Jimmy. I answered a collect call from prison from Black Jimmy, a guy who sent me their manuscript. And then I bought a ticket to Florida to pick Black Jimmy up after a 12-year bid. And then we went to the casino. I bought sushi and Black Jimmy had steak. He wanted an escort. I paid for one for him. And then we had to get a hotel room. I slept on the floor. Black Jimmy needed the bed for obvious reasons. I brought my sleeping bag, thank God. Under the air conditioner, I felt pretty comfortable. And then I remembered I forgot to brush my teeth. And I forgot that I took Viagra the night before when I made love to that Amazon driver. Seconds before I brushed my teeth, I took the medication. It was still on the toothbrush. And then my surprise erection acted out. It extended long and clicked the red switch on the power strip while I slept. It found itself turning on the Christmas lights, glowing bright on the hotel lawn. And then Black Jimmy mistook the flashes from the plastic candy canes for police lights and the SWAT team. And then Black Jimmy shoved the hooker out the back door and put me in a headlock near the sink. And then the cop said, "You better come out, Jimmy." Black Jimmy didn't want to go back in again. And then I bit Black Jimmy's forearm and ran for it. He tackled me before the cops shot him. And then Black Jimmy fell on my back. We spun like a dreidel, spinning on my raging hard-on. It carried the weight, did not buckle. The police were able to get Black Jimmy off of it. And then they arrested me as an accomplice, the supposed hotel boyfriend. And then I went to prison. I sent presses my manuscript, used my complimentary phone calls on the coolest publishers. I had to get back to the casino. All right, that's it.
Jeff, first of all, I'm really glad that today being the second day of Hanukkah, we almost went the entirety of Misery Loves Company without a dreidel reference, and that would have been a tragedy. That would have been a great cultural disservice. So we got our Hanukkah poem tonight, guys. Anyway, setting that aside, Jeff, I fucking love this poem. I love this poem. First of all, obviously it's it's fucking hilariously funny. But what I love most about this poem is the way reality comes undone over the course of the poem, right? Like it starts out reasonably mundane, and then you see it like each like line becomes just a little bit more absurd, just a little bit more absurd, to the point that like I love the fact that in that last like quarter of the poem, reality has become undone to the point that just thinking the cops are there is enough to make the cops be there. I love that's a great like, because first it's a misunderstanding, right? But then the cops are actually fucking there. And I love that like breakdown in like the structure of the reality of the poem. I love the fucking this slapstick series of events that begins with the narrator putting the toothbrush in their mouth and ends with them on the ground in front of the hotel spinning together like a dreidel because of the Viagra mishap. It's so good, it's so absurd, it's so original, and it's so, you know what, I actually getting to the like deteriorating reality thing. I love, like, since I knew going in that you were a publisher, and since you start with the premise that you start with like a publisher premise, like you need to go get him out of jail. I almost thought, oh, is this going to be auto-fictional? Which like set it up, since it got so goofy. It's wonderful that it was set up for me with that question of like, oh, is this going to be like a slice up from Jeff's life? And then I hope it was. Anyway, man, that was very fun. I love it.
Shit, man. It's a little auto-fictional, sure. Thank
Jeff,
you.
that was like the penis core label is cool. And that reminded me actually of this I think it's a Dutch cartoon called John Dillerman, especially like the out of control like penis hitting the light switch and shit. Like that was fucking awesome. And the spun like a dreidel thing, everybody is going nuts about that, or a couple people are going nuts about that in the chat. I like that, just that imagery of like spinning the guy around like on your back. I don't know, it's cool. That fucking rock, man.
Thanks, Rudy. Well, hopefully there's a lot more penis core coming on down the pike.
It's happening now. It's a thing now. It's
Penis
that's
core.
going to be Misery Loves Company's major contribution to American letters. Penis core.
Yes.
All right. Okay, guys. Okay. Thank you, Jeff. And that said, Brandon is up next, and he's the last reader. It's only 9:30, so if somebody did have a piece that they wanted to read after Brandon is done, we definitely have time. But we've also gone for a solid hour, so if everyone has read what they want to read, we can close up shop after Brandon. So either way, B-Boy, the floor is yours.
All right, so it's been a while since I've done any kind of cathartic writing, so I figured I would do some this week, and this is what came out of it. When I was 12 years old, my mother went into surgery for the first time for her heart. This was the first time since my great-grandmother had passed a few years earlier that I was confronted with the concept of mortality. Time and time again, I found myself in the same position, sitting in the back seat of the car on the 2-hour drive from Malone to Burlington, trying not to focus on the reason for the road trip. This wasn't to say that I was unaware of what was going on. I was educated about everything from both my mother and her doctors. I was the only 7th grader that had an actual angioplasty catheter and balloon to present at our school science fair. The stress was something that I struggled with. Having to know all of these things on top of being a bullied child at school wasn't easy. I began to condition myself the only way that I knew how. Knowing that the best way to cope with difficulties was to remind yourself that the hard times were only temporary, I began to convince myself that everything was temporary. The bullies, the stress, even people. This wasn't easy, it wasn't enjoyable, but it got me through the road trips month after month and year after year. When I was a teenager and I was informed that my stepsister's firstborn child had been beaten to death by her boyfriend in Colorado, the temporary theory was applied for the first time. I never got to meet my first nephew and never would. A year and a half later, and my oldest stepsister was gone too, from a car accident caused by a mentally handicapped patient grabbing the steering wheel during transport. It hurt, and I didn't know what to think, but I reminded myself of how temporary we can all be. When I was 23 and my grandparents began to fall one by one, I reminded myself that they were only ever meant to be temporary, and that the grief that accompanied their passing would be temporary as well. And so it was. I was able to remind myself that their presence and now the lack of their presence was proof of the temporary nature of everyone and everything, including the pain that I knew they were all in. The now decade-old coping mechanism was proving its worth. It genuinely helped me through. It's only in recent years that I've come to realize how detrimental this had become. Difficulties maintaining friendships from college with more than a handful of people. Difficulties maintaining relationships for more than a few years. Difficulties in keeping in touch with relatives that I care about, my mother included, as much as I want to. I was aware of it the entire time. I knew that my conditioned belief that everyone is temporary extended to myself, and that I too was temporary. When I moved away from my hometown, that was part of the reason why. I felt the negativity stemming from thinking of myself as temporary, and I knew it wasn't healthy. So I followed my instincts and tried to change it, tried to find something, anything that could be permanent and prove my theory wrong. COVID slammed the brakes on that idea, and losing motivation, I fell back into the same old patterns and the same old way of thinking. Then we were all reminded of how temporary we can be by force. Seeing that the axiom applied to people beyond grandparents and parents was a challenge, and one that I'm still struggling with. 2 years later, I'm back in the north with an aunt that was murdered by her husband last year and a mother who has been in the hospital for heart complications 3 times since I moved back. Everyone is temporary, but that thought is no longer comforting. That thought is now an anchor around my neck, ready to fall into the sea. Every time that a notification dings, I question if it will be the last. I find myself crippled with anxiety whenever I see a message on all platforms, direct, text, or otherwise, unable to make myself open them unless spurred to do so by an immediate need. Interacting in person is easier, but I find myself choosing not to all the same. Everything is temporary until you know that it isn't. One day I hope to make that realization permanent.
Jesus, man, that was raw as fuck and legitimately fucking heartbreaking. I'm sorry about the shit with your mom. I'm going to talk about this piece a little bit on a personal level, and then I'm going to talk about it as a piece of writing, right? So on a personal level, man, the fucking shit about the notifications and stuff. I know just recently when my grandmother was in the hospital, literally every time the phone would ring, something inside me was like, oh, this is it. She's gone. This is it. And it's hard. Like, when someone you love is sick and it's serious, that thought is always there. It's always present. It's always nagging. It's always even if and it's hard to find consolation in that space, right? It's really fucking hard to find consolation in that space because like the consolation often is like, oh God, I hope this will go on a few more months, a few more years, or whatever. Anyway, I don't want to get.
Yeah,
I'm
no,
not saying
absolutely.
that's going to
Absolutely.
make you feel worse, but it's so hard. It's so fucking hard, man. And I'm really sad. I feel really bad that you're going through that at this juncture. It fucking sucks so hard.
Yeah.
That said, I want to talk about this as a piece of writing too, because I think as a piece of writing, first of all, I really like how it's mirrored, right? Where the 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 setup, there's a very clear setup and very clear payoff. Like there's a very clear premise presented and an explanation and a rationalization there. And then all of that is subverted and undermined and flipped upside down at the end. I also This is also really astute and very frank and very direct exploration of the way that our coping strategies turn into pathologies, which which is holy shit, man, which is something I've been thinking about a lot lately, but also in general throughout my life. Like, it's so weird how the like psychological processes that you construct to protect and insulate yourself from the world becomes shit that sabotages you later. And how hard that is to break even when you know you should. And anyway, it's really it's very psychologically sharp and very direct and very frank. And there's a lot of emotion conveyed by this piece without the use of any flowery language, which is remarkable, right? That a piece can be frank, it can be direct, it can be unequivocal in its language, and at no point like layer on the adjectives or the explicitly emotional words and still be like of be like being hit in the face by a 2x4 or shot in the back of the head or something. Anyway, man, this is good. And once again, I'm sorry. And Rudy and I are in the area, as you
Oh
know.
yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
if something happens and you ever need help from me or my family, or just let me know, man.
Yeah, absolutely. Same. 100%.
I don't see anyone. No one else has offered to read, and honestly, there's a kind of weird, if sad, unity to the fact that
Mhm.
we opened with Cletus's piece about his grandfather, and we closed with that piece about you and your family. So I think we're going to end it there. I think we're going to end it there. This was a good one tonight, guys. It was also kind of a heart-wrenching one. I'm glad we had Rudy's Warhammer feature in the middle there, because which is it's weird to say that like a piece about like the way the Israel-Palestine conflict has been weaponized in social media would be like this pick me up, this lighthearted pick me up in the middle of the night, but I think we really needed that piece tonight, guys. Anyway, thank you everyone who read. Thank you, Cletus. Thank you, Rudy. Thank you, Keith. Thank you, Jan warging into Rudy. Thank you, Jeff. And yes, it's very good we had Jeff's piece tonight too. That was another one that really helped break up the emotional devastation. And finally, thank you, Brandon. Thank you, B-Boy. It's been a good night. Lots of good pieces. That's it. That's fucking it. This has been Misery Loves Company. We do this every Friday night, 8 p.m. Eastern Time, 5 p.m. Pacific. Anyone is welcome to come and join us. Anyone is welcome to come and share their work. We're doing at least one more of these before we go on a little hiatus for Christmas. So bring your best shit next week, guys. Yeah, if you'd like to join us, we tweet out the link from our Twitter account at Misery Tourism. And that's it. Thank you, everyone. We're going to end it there.